Opening the center instantly creates dynamic possibilities and potential for early tactical skirmishes. Challenging white's central pawn immediately creates an unbalanced battlefield, steering the game towards dynamic complexities. Developing a knight towards the center, this prepares d4 and challenges black's central influence. Developing this knight to a natural square establishes a solid central presence and prepares for potential d5 thrusts. A classic Sicilian setup emerges, immediately creating intricate tactical possibilities and pressuring black's knight. Preparing to solidify the center and open lines for the queen and bishop. Securing the king's safety is paramount, allowing the pieces to coordinate their assault. Initiating development on the king side, this knight's placement prepares for queenside castling and aims to control central squares. Building a solid pawn chain solidifies central control and prepares for future queenside expansion. Asserting queenside space now challenges the bishop's influence and prepares to disrupt white's coordination. Retreating the bishop here, white aims to maintain flexibility, avoiding an immediate pawn structure commitment while keeping the option to re-engage on the queenside open. Black bravely expands queenside, challenging white's bishop and gaining crucial pawn territory. Re-establishing the bishop's defense, this retreat aims to maintain pressure on the queenside pawns while preparing for future pawn breaks. Developing the bishop to a robust diagonal, it prepares for pawn advances and supports the center without committing prematurely. Unleashing a pawn thrust, white immediately challenges black's central pawn structure, aiming for an open position and potential piece activity. Exchanging the central pawn opens lines, but cedes space for now. Opening the center strategically, this pawn capture firmly establishes central control and prepares further pawn pushes. Boldly challenging white's center, this knight boldly ventures forward, aiming to disrupt the queenside structure and harass the bishop. Unleashing a pawn storm, white boldly challenges black's central influence and creates potential for a powerful queenside invasion. Sacrificing the knight here opens lines for black's queen and bishop, creating attacking chances despite the material deficit. Reclaiming the center, your queen now eyes the weakened d5 square and aims to connect your rooks for future action. Repositioning the knight to g6 aims to free the f-pawn, potentially preparing for a kingside attack or defensive maneuvering. Opening the rook's file now grants immediate central influence and prepares for potential pressure down the d-file. Asserting the crucial c-file, black intensifies the pressure along this open highway, aiming to disrupt white's central grip. Sharpening the focus on the kingside while keeping the queenside fluid, this transition seeks to consolidate the central advantage. Unleashing the bishop, black now eyes the crucial diagonal, preparing for a potential queenside pawn push and aiming to solidify piece harmony. Securing the bishop's diagonal and preparing to challenge black's active pieces. Unleashing the queen, this maneuver seeks to exploit the weakened light squares around white's king and instigate counterplay on the queen side. Simplifying the pawn structure now opens up clear lines for your pieces, directly confronting black's queenside ambitions. The doubled pawns on the c-file are now a structural weakness, and the queen has found a comfortable central outpost. Unyielding pressure builds on the central files, preparing a swift knight sortie towards the king's sanctuary. Re-establishing safety for the king provides a solid foundation, anticipating potential central skirmishes and allowing for future piece regrouping. Repositioning the queen to d2 is a subtle bid for control over the central files, preparing for potential pawn pushes or piece activity. Opening the e-file offers dynamic counterplay, directly challenging the central structure. This pawn push threatens to unravel black's kingside defenses, creating significant attacking potential along the open files. Unveiling a subtle pawn sacrifice to challenge white's central dominance and potentially activate the d-file for black's pieces. Boldly seeking kingly secrets, white's pawn march uncovers the knight's retreat while simultaneously menacing black's queenside structure. Suddenly, a knight boldly infiltrates white's defensive structure, challenging the bishop and eyeing kingside possibilities. Challenging black's pawn structure head-on, white forces a critical decision regarding the kingside. Reinforcing the pawn chain, black prepares to contest the d-file but leaves the kingside slightly weakened. A strategic pawn push aiming to disrupt black's queenside coordination and potentially open lines for white's pieces. Reclaiming the queenside flank's initiative, this maneuver prepares to challenge white's central grip by redeploying the queen to a more active diagonal. Consolidating control over the central files, this maneuver prepares to exert pressure along the c-file. Challenging the king's shield by occupying the center file and eyeing exposed pawns. Shifting the queen to target black's central pawns and open lines for future attack creates interesting tactical possibilities. Exchanging queens simplifies the position, potentially leading to a favorable endgame for black with active minor pieces. The pawn structure now solidifies, granting white control of central open lines for future maneuverability and an advantage in space. Reclaiming the knight from its passive outpost, seeking active play and potential attacking prospects on the kingside. Reorganizing pieces, the knight repositions to potentially challenge black's central control and find active squares. Repositioning the rook to the c-file aims to challenge white's control and prepare for potential pawn breakthroughs later. Asserting control of the queenside flank opens new lines for the rook. Opening that queenside pawns might invite unexpected pressure along the new semi-open file. Claiming the open file with the knight now begins to unravel black's pawn structure. Centralizing the rook now aims to contest the open file and potentially pressure white's weak pawns. Initiating a decisive exchange to simplify into a potentially advantageous pawn structure. The rook's repositioning on the open file seeks to disrupt white's kingside pawn structure and contest control. A bold thrust that aims to exploit the weakened light squares after the pawn exchange. Repositioning the knight to f6 aims to contest the important central squares and prepare for potential kingside operations. Opening a clear path for your knight to exploit the weakened kingside pawn structure. Reorganizing the knight to a better square, eyeing potential outpost gains or a timely flank push. Solidifying the queenside pawn structure, this move prepares to bolster the bishop's influence and control the c-file more effectively. Bringing the king closer to the center aims to bolster pawn support and potentially activate it in the upcoming middle game transition. Recentering the knight prepares to contest the d-file, a vital conduit for both kings. Solidifying the kingside pawn structure, f6 aims to prevent any immediate weaknesses and prepares for a potential kingside advance later in the game. Reinforcing the kingside pawn structure solidifies white's defensive wall and prepares for potential kingside action later. Focusing the king towards the center is crucial for surviving this rocky endgame. Initiating a knight sortie, this move probes the kingside and aims to disrupt black's pawn structure. Shifting the king closer to the action could be a prelude to defending the vulnerable kingside pawn structure. Initiating pawn storm on the kingside, aiming to rupture black's defenses and seize initiative. This placement on the c8 square aims to support the pawn structure and potentially prepare for a rook exchange or regrouping, while white consolidates their advantage. Opening a kingside pawn storm can unleash powerful attacking potential, but it risks weakening your own defenses significantly. Boldly challenging the central control, this bishop repositions to contest the important dark squares and eye white's somewhat exposed kingside. Re-establishing knight presence centrally, this maneuver aims to improve coordination and contest the f-file for potential future advances. Unveiling the bishop on g4 reactivates a dormant piece, challenging white's pawn structure and potentially disrupting the king's safety. Sacrificing the knight to rip open the kingside further promises a powerful attack, potentially overwhelming black's defenses. Sacrificing the knight opens up lines, aiming to disrupt white's pawn structure and create immediate tactical chances around the king. Sacrificing a knight to shatter the pawn shield and expose the king is audacious, aiming for a swift checkmate. The discovered check immediately creates tactical chaos, forcing the black king into a precarious central position. Striking at the knight opens a direct path to black's exposed king. Sacrificing the bishop opens crucial lines for the knight, aiming to penetrate white's weakened king defenses. Unlocking the queenside and preparing to penetrate with fresh energy.